Hello, Chapter 12, Cognitive Development in Middle Childhood. Hey, during middle childhood, cognitive abilities broaden. Abilities to understand and master complex skills increases. But remember, children's thinking is still not fully adult-like. Let's take a look at what Piaget said about cognitive development at this stage. From Piaget's perspective, the preschooler thinks pre-operationally. What this means is that the type of thinking is largely still egocentric, and pre-operational children lack the ability to use operations. That means to organize formal, logical mental processes. Pre-operational thought is characterized as largely egocentric and the inability to use operations. Now, the rise of concrete operational thought is happening in middle childhood. It's the period between 7 and 12 years old, and it's characterized by the active and appropriate use of logic. Decentering, let's talk about that. Remember the bird picture in the preschool cognitive chapter? Well, the ability to take multiple aspects of the situation into account, this is getting more holistic. Rather than seeing discrete parts of a picture, now the child is starting to grow into the understanding that they can see the big picture. Take a look at this. If you had no other information, you would say that this route would be longer and this one's shorter. But we know algebraically this might be the shorter route if we had more information. Pre-operational children are not capable, according to Piaget, of this sort of thinking yet. So, Piaget was quite successful describing cognitive development. However, he did underestimate children's capabilities. He underestimated the age in which cognitive abilities emerged. Let's talk about the information processing approach in middle childhood. Increased sophistication in information handling and processing, and increased data processing as memory size increases. Let's unpack information processing, okay, and talk about memory. It's the process by which information is initially recorded, stored, and retrieved. Recording, encoding, the child initially records information in form usable to memory. This is putting memory information into the brain that's usable to the child, so the child can retrieve the information. Short-term memory capacity improves significantly in middle childhood. Meta-memory. Meta means overarching. So meta-memory means thinking about your memory. It's an understanding about the processes that underlie memory that emerge and improve during childhood. School-age children's understanding of memory becomes more sophisticated as they grow older because they increasingly engage in what's called control strategies. They have their own ways in which they use to remember certain things. Similarly, children in middle school increasingly use mnemonics. Mnemonics are things like using acrostics to remember Roy G. Biv, to remember the colors, or other mnemonics are available that teachers use for understanding the planets and so on and so forth. Now, Vygotsky's approach supports the practice of that children actively participate in educational experiences. Remember, Vygotsky is associated with social, provides the foundations for several current and noteworthy educational innovations, such as cooperative learning and group work in general, and reciprocal teaching to teach reading comprehension, when modeling is an important part, and repeating back and remodeling and also reteaching, and the child also becomes the teacher in certain situations. Reciprocal teaching. So, language development, what do words mean? The linguistic sophisticated children, particularly at the start of school age period, still requires refinement to reach adult levels of expertise. Adults matter much. So, language mechanics, vocabulary, mastery of grammar, pronunciation, and intonation. Metalinguistic awareness, meta-memory, metalinguistic, what do you think that might mean? Thinking about your language. It's an awareness that helps children achieve comprehension when information is fuzzy or complete. Now, what they might do is use self-talk and those sorts of strategies. But the growing sophistication of language helps school-age children control their behavior. They may use self-talk to regulate their behavior, and the effectiveness of their self-control may grow as their linguistic abilities increase. Bilingualism. Our country is becoming much more diverse, and bilingualism is the ability to teach two languages. So what makes children ready for school? Delaying children's entry in school does not necessarily provide an advantage. In some cases, it may be harmful. On the other flip side, accelerating a child into school may be harmful as well. But age in itself, chronological age, is not a critical indicator of when children should begin school. Instead, the start of formal schooling is more reasonably tied to the overall development of readiness. Is the child ready to go to school? It's a complex combination of several factors that parents and teachers must weigh. With regards to reading, now, reading skills, whether or not you can be a word caller and just know what the letters mean, there's a finite amount of sounds and letters, so you can decode these letters and sounds and say the words, but do you really understand what you're reading? Literacy is understanding the world through words. The mechanical aspect of reading is just calling the words out and not understanding them. So let's look at the stages of reading. There are 5 stages: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want you to look at these and to know them. Multicultural education. There's a cultural assimilation model, which is the melting pot. Everyone will become something called an American, whatever that is. Pluralistic society model, which is there is a tapestry of cultures there that we are all woven together. And then there's the idea of a bicultural identity, that you are something called the American. That's a hard concept, isn't it? And also your ethnic identity that you have from another country or another culture. In 2050, our world as we know it in 1950 will be significantly different. White Americans will be in the numerical minority. Now, let's talk about teacher expectation. The teacher expectancy effect is the phenomenon whereby a teacher has high expectations and the child will meet those expectations. This is a very important concept for you to know and to use in your teaching profession. So, should schools teach emotional intelligence? And what is emotional intelligence? It's a set of skills that underlie the accurate assessment, evaluation, expression, and regulation of emotions. Goleman, associated with emotional intelligence, said it should be a standard part of schooling and the curriculum. What do you think? Intelligence. It's a capacity to understand the world, think rationally, and use resources effectively when faced with challenges. Now, the problem with measuring intelligence is what is it that these tests measure, and then what is the concept of intelligence? We all know about the IQ. It was started by Alfred Binet back in the beginning of the 20th century, and what it basically is a quotient. It's mental age, chronological age, and quotient. So the mental age is, if it's higher than the chronological age, you would be above average. Then again, if your mental age is lower than the chronological age, you would have a below average intelligence. Look at that formula. We'll go over it in class, but it's something that I want you to know. IQ scores fall on it's called a normal curve. Half the population is below the average and half are above. You can see here that 2/3 of the population falls between an 85 IQ and a 115. Below 70, we're talking about special needs children in the cognitive area. Above 130, we're talking about giftedness. You can see the percentages are only 2.1s on either end of the scale. So what IQs tell you and what they don't tell you, the idea of fluid intelligence reflects information processing, reasoning, memory. Crystallized intelligence, this is like over time, old guys like me learn things because of experience. The triarchy theory of intelligence, this is Sternberg's theory, and he believes that and theorizes the aspect of the information processing model that you have the componential element. This is how well do you put things together. The experiential element, what do you learn from your environment? And the contextual environment element, when faced with a new situation, how do you handle it? Okay, so below the norm, as I said, below 70 is definitely special needs, but when you go significantly below the norm, we're talking about mental retardation. Okay, so how do we measure that, and how do we gauge limitations in adaptive behavior? Okay, know these stages of retardation: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Once again, I also want you to know on the other side of the normal curve, gifted and talented. Now, acceleration is what we're thinking now that children need, not a different curriculum, but one that they move through faster. And that concludes our cognitive development in middle school. We're moving on to social and emotional in middle childhood, chapter 13.